After months of tense negotiations, the US finally opened the door for Nvidia's H20 chips to return to China. But now, Beijing is telling its companies, don't buy them. This is more than a tech story. It's about security, sovereignty, and the future of the global AI race. To understand how we got here, we have to go back to the H20. This chip was Nvidia's clever and frankly necessary workaround to bypass the initial wave of US restrictions on high-end AI hardware going to China. The original bans targeted chips with the highest computational power and interconnect speeds, fearing their use in military applications. So, Nvidia engineered the H20 to be just compliant enough. It was deliberately hobbled, less powerful than their top-tier models like the H100, with reduced data transfer rates to stay just under the legal threshold for export. It was a strategic sacrifice, designed to keep the lights on in one of their most lucrative markets. But Washington saw it as a loophole. By late 2024, the rules changed again. The ban was extended, specifically targeting chips like the H20. For Nvidia, this was a body blow, effectively cutting them off from a market worth an estimated $6.5 billion in annual sales. Their main rival, AMD, was also caught in the crossfire, facing the loss of around $2.5 billion. The message was clear: the loopholes were closed. Then, in May 2025, with the tech world bracing for impact, a surprising mini-deal was struck behind closed doors. The terms were a classic trade-off. The US agreed to lift the ban on these specific, less powerful chips. In return, China would increase its exports of rare earth minerals. These aren't just some obscure elements on the periodic table, they are the lifeblood of modern technology. From the magnets in electric vehicles and wind turbines to the screens on our phones and the guidance systems in defense hardware, they are absolutely critical. And with China controlling over 80% of the global processing capacity, they held a powerful bargaining chip. But here's the twist. The deal wasn't formalized in any treaty. It was an informal handshake agreement with a truly unorthodox condition attached. Nvidia and AMD agreed to give the US government a 15% cut of all gross revenue from these newly permitted China sales. The Trump administration saw this as a masterstroke, a kind of tech tariff. The idea was to use the profits generated from a strategic rival to directly fund America's own domestic semiconductor R&D and manufacturing initiatives. It was a protectionist policy wrapped in the language of a partnership. A bold, unprecedented attempt to make American tech policy pay for itself. But this handshake deal, built on a fragile foundation of profit sharing and resource dependency, was about to unravel in the most spectacular way. Only weeks after the new US rules were announced, the response from Beijing came not with a bang, but with a whisper. Chinese authorities quietly sent letters, not just to massive state-owned enterprises, but to a wide array of private companies involved in government contracts or sensitive national projects. The message was unambiguous: avoid Nvidia's H20 chip. This wasn't a public decree or a legal ban that could be challenged at the WTO. It was window guidance, an informal but powerful directive. In China's state capitalist system, such guidance carries the full weight of law, instantly reshaping the market and redirecting billions in spending. The official rationale, outlined in these directives, centered on three critical concerns. First and foremost, national security. The fear wasn't just abstract, it was a deeply ingrained suspicion that foreign-made, high-performance chips could contain hidden backdoors. Beijing's security apparatus is convinced these components could be tracked, hacked, or, in a worst-case scenario, remotely disabled by a foreign adversary. Imagine the lights going out in Shanghai or the nation's high-speed rail network grinding to a halt. For China, embedding US-designed silicon into its critical infrastructure, from its power grid and financial systems to its military AI projects, was now seen as an unacceptable strategic vulnerability. The second pillar of the guidance was economic self-reliance, a cornerstone of President Xi Jinping's national strategy. This is where the policy's true impact hits home for American firms. In the year leading up to the expanded bans, Nvidia's sales to China were estimated to be north of $6 billion, with AMD adding another $2.5 billion to the pot. This wasn't just revenue, it was a fire hose of cash funding American R&D. Beijing's new directive aims to turn that fire hose inward, channeling that immense demand toward its own national champions like Huawei and Cambricon. The goal is to accelerate the Made in China, 2025 Inches initiative, creating a domestic, sanction-proof tech ecosystem, even if their current products can't yet match Nvidia's performance. Finally, there was the simple, bruising issue of product value. The H20 wasn't just seen as a weaker chip, it was perceived as an insult. Chinese tech giants, from Alibaba to Tencent, looked at the specs and saw a deliberately hobbled second-tier product, a piece of technology designed not to empower them, but to contain them. Why, they argued, should they invest their vast resources in integrating a compromised chip with a limited future? It made more strategic sense to endure short-term pain by investing in domestic alternatives that, while less powerful today, are free from foreign control and have a clear path for improvement. It was a rejection of technological subjugation. The market's verdict was swift and brutal. In China, the news sent shockwaves of a different kind. Shares in the nation's leading AI chipmaker, Cambricon, immediately surged to their daily limit of 20%. It wasn't an isolated event. Across the board, other domestic semiconductor and technology stocks rallied powerfully. For investors in Beijing and Shanghai, the message was clear. If America won't sell, China will build. This was a government-endorsed pivot, a multi-billion-dollar vote of confidence in their own technological sovereignty. But back in the United States, for giants like Nvidia and AMD, the picture was far more complex and deeply troubling. China isn't just another market for them, it's a cornerstone of their global revenue. We're talking about a staggering $6.5 billion in annual sales for Nvidia, representing roughly 13% of their total income. For AMD, it's about $2.5 billion, a massive 24% of their revenue. Both companies had been strategically positioning themselves for a post-deal rebound, anticipating a flood of renewed orders. Now those hopes have evaporated. This collapse jeopardizes more than just corporate profits. It unravels a key and highly unorthodox component of the Trump administration's trade strategy. The deal included a provision that would have funneled 15% of all profits from these sales directly to the U.S. Treasury. The thinking was to let American companies dominate the market, while the government itself took a direct cut, a novel way to monetize technological supremacy. But the strategy was predicated on the deal actually happening. Without the Chinese orders, that projected revenue stream for the U.S. government simply vanishes. The policy, designed to capture a slice of the pie, has instead poisoned the well, potentially costing American firms the entire multi-billion-dollar market and accelerating China's quest for self-sufficiency. It's a stark lesson in unintended consequences, where a show of force may have permanently altered the global tech landscape. The rare earths for chips handshake was touted as a breakthrough, but by discouraging chip imports, Beijing has shown it can pocket the U.S. concession without offering a guaranteed return. It's a reminder of how fragile informal agreements can be in the middle of a geopolitical tech war, and how each side can interpret them differently. China's chip guidance right now targets sensitive uses. If Huawei and other domestic players can meet demand, the policy is likely to hold. But if production falls short, particularly for advanced AI workloads, Beijing may quietly ease restrictions, opening the door for some Nvidia and AMD shipments. That's what both the White House and U.S. chip makers are counting on. This is more than a single product dispute. It's about who controls the computing power of the future. China won't trade long-term tech sovereignty for access to foreign second-tier chips. The U.S. is testing a revenue share model that could reshape how tech companies operate under export controls. In the AI hardware race, one lesson is clear. Policy can beat product unless local supply falls short. The battle over the H20 shows how fragile deals can be, and how strategic this fight for chip dominance really is. Stay informed, stay ahead, subscribe, share, and join the conversation.